The COVID-19 global pandemic swept through the country like a raging storm. It changed everything. Now the worst is over, and we stand at the threshold of a new normal. The time of healing and rebuilding is at hand. It's time. The 59th PMAP Annual Conference is setting out a call to action. The 59th PMAP Annual Conference, our battle cry, co-regeneration, our instruments of change, our individual strengths blended together to launch one common and meaningful goal. The 59th PMAP Annual Conference. Join us. Let's make the conference our platform for adopting real and meaningful transformative change. Together, we can create a healthy and regenerative society, nation, and planet. Let's go for it. The COVID-19 global pandemic swept through the country like a raging storm. It changed everything. Now the worst is over, and we stand at the threshold of a new normal. The time of healing and rebuilding is at hand. It's time. The 59th PMAP Annual Conference is setting out a call to action. The 59th PMAP Annual Conference, our battle cry, co-regeneration, our instruments of change, our individual strengths blended together to launch one common and meaningful goal. The 59th PMAP Annual Conference. Join us. Let's make the conference our platform for adopting real and meaningful transformative change. Together, we can create a healthy and regenerative society, nation, and planet. Let's go for it. The COVID-19 global pandemic swept through the country like a raging storm. It changed everything. Now, the worst is over, and we stand at the threshold of a new normal. The time of healing and rebuilding is at hand. It's time. The 59th PMAP Annual Conference is sending out a call to action. The 59th PMAP Annual Conference, our battle cry, co-regeneration, our instruments of change, our individual strengths blended together towards one common and meaningful goal. The 59th PMAP Annual Conference. Join us. Let's make the conference our platform for adopting real and meaningful transformative change. Together, we can create a healthy and regenerative society, nation, and planet. Let's go for it. The COVID-19 global pandemic swept through the country like a raging storm. It changed everything. Now, the worst is over, and we stand at the threshold of a new normal. The time of healing and rebuilding is at hand. It's time. The 59th PMAP Annual Conference is sending out a call to action. The 59th PMAP Annual Conference, our battle cry, co-regeneration, our instruments of change, our individual strengths blended together towards one common and meaningful goal. The 59th PMAP Annual Conference. Join us. Let's make the conference our platform for adopting real and meaningful transformative change. Together, we can create a healthy and regenerative society, nation, and planet. Let's go for it.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ramon Segismundo, your MC for today's joint face-to-face general membership meeting of the Management Association of the Philippines and the People Management Association of the Philippines. On behalf of the MAP Board of Governors and the PMAP Board, I would like to call this joint general membership meeting to order. Palakpakan naman dyan. Yeah. Of course, may I now call on my co-MC, Joanne Acetre, who is the APAC Customer Success Manager of Lehec Harrison. Joanne?
Thank you so much, Sir Mon. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Such an honor and a privilege to be co-hosting this GMM with you, Sir Mon, and I'm so honored and privileged to be here with everyone else. Sir Mon, I'm so excited. Very good. I'm so excited with the topic.
Yeah,
Either
me too.
we thrive in this ever continuously changing environment. So let's start our joint GMM. I would like to invite everyone to please rise for the invocation, and this will be led by PMAP 2020 President Luisa Mila Echevarria. And then please remain standing for the Philippine National Anthem.
Let us put ourselves in the presence of God as we pray. Dear Father, we offer everything and thank you for everyone gathered here today to walk with you. May we ask you for your blessings and guidance so that the activities set for this undertaking be successful. We ask you to open our eyes to see the wonderful things from this activity. We ask you to open our ears so that we may retain the valuable knowledge. Open our minds for us to think wisely. Put us with understanding, cooperation, and peace in fulfilling our responsibilities. Open our hearts so that we may receive your everlasting love, and open our spirit that we may know that you are with us all throughout the day. We ask this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Magiliw, telas ng sikatanan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang binirang, tuyang ka ng magiting, sa mandulubing, di ka pasisigil, sa nagatang tutok sa simoy at sa langit mong bagaw, ay hinatang tulad, awit sa pagkayang minamahal, ang isang ng matawad mo'y tagumpay na nagtitindig, mapituwin at araw niya kailan ang ay magtitindig. Lumalang araw ng maraming pagsikta, mo'y langit sa piling mo. Ang inigaya na pagkay pag-aakit, at mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
You may now be seated.
And of course, Joe, it's Mama Mary's birthday today, right?
Oh yes, it is. What
Yeah,
a perfect
so-
day to celebrate, to have this GMM as well.
Yes, and for the welcome remarks on behalf of the Management Association of the Philippines, may I call on my college mate, the President of MAP and the President and CEO of Metro Pacific Water, Secretary Babes Singson.
Thank you very much, Mon and Joanne. Our distinguished speakers, friends from government, the diplomatic community, civil society, our friends from media, officers and members of PMAP, fellow MAP members, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to all of you. On behalf of the MAP Board of Governors, I welcome all of you to this joint General Membership Meeting of MAP and PMAP on the theme, Human Capital, Be Competitive or Die. I thought, whoa. In 2018, MAP and PMAP agreed to institutionalize an annual joint GMM every September. That is why we are now having this joint GMM. Many thanks to our speakers, my good friend from my Camp John Hay days in Baguio when he was still head of TI, Congressman Mark Go, Chairman of the House Committee on Higher and Technical Education, and Dr. Aniceto ORBETA Jr., President of PIDS, Philippine Institute of Development Studies. Let me also thank our MAP Human and Management Development Committee, chaired by PMAP past President Attorney Rico de Guzman, for organizing this joint GMM. Thank you also to our co-MCs, Joanne Cetre and Mon Sigismundo. Our topic for today's joint GMM is in relation to MAP's policy recommendation to government to address the education crisis. To our policy recommendations, we have advocated for the mobilization of the Second Education Commission created by the new Second Congressional Commission on Education, or EDCOM Act 2, and its multi-sectoral advisory council. MAP's specific recommendation is to develop a clear roadmap to address the learning crisis and pursue fundamental reforms, ensure public-private complementarity, institutionalize lifelong learning, continuing upskilling, and draw on international best practices on education and new knowledge in the field of social and behavioral sciences. We are fortunate that one of the principal authors of EDCOM 2 Act is here with us today, together with the head of PIDS, which serves as the research arm of EDCOM 2. Let me also take this opportunity to invite all of you to the MAP International CEO Conference on the theme, The Winds of Change, Thriving in a World of In-Betweens, organized by the MAP CEO Conference Committee chaired by Alma Jimenez. The conference will be held this coming Tuesday in this same ballroom. That's September 13. The speakers and the topics are being flashed on the screen. Thanks to Business World, Converge ICT, and First Philippine Holdings for co-presenting this year's MAP conference. Thanks to PwC Philippines for continuing to be our knowledge partner. Thank you too to our premium partners, Forecasting and Planning Technologies, SM Investments Corporation, and BDO. Thank you too to our other partners, now shown on the screen. On behalf of the MAP Nominations and Elections Committee chaired by Malu Cristobal, I urge the MAP members to cast your vote for MAP governors for the years 2023 to 2024. They have been sent to your email boxes, and please use the Google form as much as you can. The following are the 10 candidates in alphabetical order. Note that we have a good balance between 5 males and 5 females. Thank you to these nominees for accepting their nomination. Please vote for a maximum of 5 candidates. In the interest of time, I will not go over these candidates. They might think that I'm advocating or pushing for some candidates, campaigning for some, bawal daw eh. So 5 governors will be elected and they will be announced on October 13 during the MAP GMM meeting. The 5 newly elected governors will join Attorney Alex Cabrera, Dr. Shell Habito, Dr. Donald Lim, and Dr. Chito Salazar, who are the current carryover 2023 board members. The election period will go all the way until October 10, 2022. Allow me a few more minutes to give an update on recent MAP board actions. On October 24, 2022, we issued through the MAP Infrastructure Committee headed by EDIAP our statement urging total system upgrade and privatization of the EDSA busway and bus service. We earlier submitted to DOTR Secretary Jaime J. Bautista our recommendation for the DOTR to prioritize the total system upgrade of the busway on EDSA and the bus service or the carousel line. MAP also urged the DOTR to consider the privatization of both busway and bus service, and equally as important is the privatization of our urban commuter rail system consisting of MRT3, LRT2, and the PNR commuter lines. The MAP Infrastructure Committee is now conducting a series of roundtable meetings with PPP experts and stakeholders of the industry to generate inputs for the terms of reference for the bidding and award of the concessions, which will be submitted for consideration of the OTR. As MAP, we have assured Secretary Bautista of our support in assisting the OTR to fulfill its mandate and commitment to provide efficient mass public transport that is up to global standards. On another front, last August 29, MAP co-signed with other prominent organizations the joint letter to President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. concerning the freedom of speech and press freedom. The letter we co-signed stressed, and I quote, "Foremost among these are the freedom of speech and press freedom, which are a necessary requisite in a democracy, to help ensure that government services operate honestly and properly, and Filipinos can flourish in a free and open society. These fundamental freedoms, together with the just enforcement of laws, are also essential considerations that go into investment and business decisions. We believe a policy statement from His Excellency on these subjects could further boost confidence across all sectors, at home and abroad, as we pursue the goals you have laid out." End of quote. Finally, please mark your calendars for the following forthcoming events of MAP. On October 13, face-to-face general membership meeting on tourism, on the Tourism Outlook Beyond 2022, organized by the MAP Trade Investments and Tourism Committee chaired by Charlie Villaseñor. Of course, on November 3, for the golfers, there's an event for you. This is organized by the MAP Sports and Fellowship and Wellness Committee chaired by Peng Perez de Tagle. This is sponsored in partnership with First Philippine Holdings. On November 11, the Next Gen Conference, or the Generation Shift, Mindsets, Motivations, Management, which is a project of the MAP Next Gen Committee chaired by Cliff Ayala. Thank you to everyone for your continuing support to MAP, and please join the MAP Bulletin Board on Viber so that you will not miss any MAP announcement or circular. Please stay in touch with us through our various communications channels such as email, Viber, newsletter, MAP memo, and the Facebook. I don't see how you can miss any of these announcements. I have 15 committees that I attend to every morning. Our linked account for regular updates on MAP programs and activities. Mabuhay kayong lahat at maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat, babes. Mabuhay po kayo.
Thank you so much for babes. For the welcome remarks on behalf of People Management Association of the Philippines, may I now call on the President of PMAP and the VP for Human Resources and Administrative Services of the Fred J. Elizalde Group of Companies, Ms. Ellen Fulido.
Thank you so much, Joanne and PP Mon Sigismundo. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. This is the usual MAP-PMAP joint general membership meeting which we have been doing since 2018, but we decided that this year we'll do away with the usual PMAP President's Report and the induction ceremonies for our new members. Instead, we would like to focus on the discussion for today because we believe that today's topic, be competitive or you die. In Tagalog, mamamatay ka. No? Sabi nga ni Sir Babes Singson. Good afternoon once again, and to the chairman of the House Committee on Higher and Technical Education, Honorable Congressman Mark Go, who used to be, he's a PMAPper. He was once the president of PMAP, and to President of the Philippine Institute of Development Studies, Dr. ANICETO ORBETA. Maayong hapon, sir. To MAP President, MAP, my counterpart, Engineer Babe Singson. I used to make kulit to him in our projects in Manila Broadcasting Company. Past President Rico de Guzman, Mr. Montinola, one of our Suki in PMAP also, to the esteemed members of the Management Association of the Philippines, as well as the members of People Management Association of the Philippines. Good afternoon, a pleasant day to all of you. Today is a great day in the field of people management and in our businesses and organizations, for we have gathered some of the most renowned groups of professionals in the industry. As we endeavor to uplift the human capital and as we endeavor to bridge the gap between the industry and the academe, we are here to hear from our renowned speakers how we would go about improving the lives of our Filipino human capital. We're an intelligent species, and I know that we're not just going to go extinct. You know, today's event is somewhat likened to Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection. In the natural selection, Darwin stated that every species continues to evolve, and adapt in the current situation in order for them to survive. Hence, some species would adapt to rise from the food chain, and if you don't have no adaptability, then you will go extinct. Unlike in the human capital, we continue to strive in order to provide methods and activities and learnings for our human capital. We reskill them, we upskill them, and we retool them, especially coming from the 2 years of pandemic. We really need to pivot, go around, look for ways and means in order for us not just to survive, but to continuously thrive in the ever-changing environment. In this age, and time, especially coming from the pandemic, we must be able to adapt in our strategies and management. The collaboration between our organizations, both MAP and PMAP, will continue to strengthen the partnership and camaraderie that we have built over the years since 2018. It only shows that we are ready to promote and continue to develop sound people management across the country and across all industries, in all organizations, be it in private or in the government. Most importantly, our partnership and teamwork shows that our organization will never die. So we're not gonna go extinct, we'll never die. For as long as we continuously strive to strengthen our bond in order to improve our lives, then we're not going to die. We are ready to face the challenges ahead and evolve from them. We hope that you will also join us in our annual conference. We're also celebrating the 66th anniversary of the People Management Association of the Philippines. This is going to happen from October 12 to 14 at the Sofitel Philippine Plaza. We're going hybrid also, and we hope that you too can join us as we tackle people management related topics, very, very relevant to our theme, core generation. And so we hope that this afternoon will not just be a learning day for all of us, but it will also be an enjoyable one for all of you participating in this event. Again, Ellen Fulido po, maraming salamat from the People Management Association of the Philippines. Good day.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ellen, for the reminder to continuously evolve. Sir Mon, I'm curious, I have a question.
Yes.
What new thing have you learned in the past year or so?
Well, I've really learned to realize what's important in life.
Yeah, of course. Thanks a lot for that reminder. I'm always inspired by experienced leaders who have growth mindset and learning mindset. I'm so excited for today. Sir Mon, what do we have next?
Okay, by the way, that was not scripted. That didn't have Arnold's approval, but this is a
Yeah.
conversation. So at this point, we would like to present the new MAP members for induction. And to do that, I would like to call on the chair of the MAP Membership Committee, who is also the chair of Far Eastern University, someone that I've always admired, Mr. Gigi Montinola.
Good afternoon, and congratulations to PMAP on its 66th anniversary. I am pleased to announce that this afternoon, we will be inducting 10 new members of the MAP, Management Association of the Philippines, which in turn will increase our total membership from 1,075 to 1,085. I will read the names of the inductees, and as your name is called, please come to the stage to be recognized. Our first inductee is Dr. Shirley Castañeda Agrupis, President of Mariano Marcos State University, or MMSU. Line of business is education. Sponsors are Mr. Oscar A. Toralba and attorney Francisco Lim. Our second inductee is Mr. Ibrahim Iba R. Bernardo, co-founder of Packworks. Line of business, cloud-based enterprise resource planning services. Sponsors, Mr. Romeo Bernardo and Ms. Margot Torres. Third, we have Mr. Luis Guillermo Franco Luis Carrillo, the President and CEO of Cemex Holding Philippines. Line of business is the manufacture and distribution of cement, and the sponsors are Attorney Francisco Lim and Secretary Rogelio Singson. Fourth, we have Ms. Cheryl Jane Chan, the COO of the University of Pangasinan. The line of business is education, and the sponsors are Dr. Chito Salazar and Attorney Francis Lim. Fifth, we have Ms. Jackie S. Fernandez. She's the president of East West Bank. Line of business is banking, and her sponsors are Attorney Francis Lim and Mr. Aurelio Montinola. Sixth, we have Mr. Samuel Alastair Sam Ramos Jones, the COO of Philippine Strategic Associates. The line of business is security and risk consultancy services, and the sponsors are Mr. Peter Wallace and Ms. Marian Hontiveros. Seventh, we have Mr. Patrick Vincent Ricky G. Peña. He's the SVP for Corporate Affairs of PT&T, and the line of business is telecommunications, and his sponsors are Mr. Jose Jerome Pascual and Attorney Francis Lim. Eighth, with Ms. Lotis C. Ramin. She's the country president of AstraZeneca Pharmaceutical Philippines. Line of business is healthcare, and the sponsors are Mr. Teodoro Padilla and Attorney Francis Lim. Ninth, we have Mr. David Roos, Managing Director of Perfetti Van Melle Philippines, Inc. Line of business is the manufacture and distribution of confectionaries. Sponsors are Mr. Tark Bartlema and Mr. Jose Jerome Pascual. And last, but definitely not the least, Ambassador Luke Veron, Ambassador of the European Union to the Philippines. The line of business is diplomatic services, and the sponsors are Ms. Alma Rita Jimenez and Mr. Juni Del Mundo. At this point, I would like to call on our MAP President, Secretary Babe Singson, to lead the induction of our new MAP members. Please all rise to add solemnity to the occasion. Thank you.
May I ask you to please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, please state your name, do hereby solemnly pledge that I will perform well and faithfully, to the best of my ability, my duties as a regular member, in order to contribute to the achievement of the objectives of the Management Association of the Philippines. So help me God. Congratulations and welcome to all of you to MAP.
Thank you so much, Sir Gigi and Sir Babes. Congratulations to the new MAP members. Let us welcome and give them another warm round of applause to the new MAP members.
So, at this point, we're now going to introduce the speakers, which is a much awaited portion. In line with the MAP policy and in the interest of time, we will dispense with the lengthy introduction of our speakers. Their profiles will be flashed on the screen though. I would like to remind our honorable speakers that you're given 20 minutes each for your respective presentations. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our first speaker, my favorite congressman, the chair of the House of Representatives, Committee on Higher and Technical Education, Congressman Mark Go of Baguio. Let's give him a big round of applause.
Reese, where are you? Where's my laptop? Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, my president of PMAP, Mon Segismundo. Of course, I would like also to recognize our other Master of Ceremonies, Joanne. Our good friend, the President of MAP, President Babe Singson, siya ang idol ko nung siya ay nasa gobyerno. PIMA President Ellen Pulido, Attorney Rico de Guzman, Dr. Aniceto Orbeta Jr., MAP officers and Board of Governors, officers and directors of PMAP, our friends from the media who are present here this afternoon, industry leaders, fellow HR practitioners, honored guests, friends, ladies and gentlemen, magandang hapon po sa inyo lahat. First of all, allow me to thank President Babe Singson, President Ellen Pulido, and past President Rico de Guzman for inviting me to be one of your resource persons in today's joint general membership meeting of the Management Association of the Philippines and the People Management Association of the Philippines to discuss the strides we must undertake, especially in the aftermath of the pandemic, when the rest of the world has focused on recovery measures and progressing with life in the new normal. Across the region alone, borders have long reopened, with industries geared towards a full revival, recovering what has been lost in the past 2 years, while focused on making gains for the future that lies ahead. The subject of transforming lives, how we view human capital in the 21st century, a pertinent matter in the field of management, is one I have a personal affinity. As some of you may know, before my foray in politics, I was a human resource practitioner and happened to become or had been one of the presidents of the People Management Association of the Philippines. So I hope you will indulge with me when I say that I have a unique vantage point and a comprehensive understanding of the Philippine educational system, in relation to producing a globally competitive talent pool, having been on both sides of the fence. One institution that has the ability to foster lasting change is education. Understanding the strides that need to be made in our educational system is key to uplifting our human capital in order to stay ahead of the times, creating and strengthening a Filipino workforce that is globally competitive and well prepared for the fourth industrial revolution. World Economic Forum Chairman Klaus Schwab first introduced the concept of the fourth industrial revolution, which refers to the fundamental change in the way we live and work and relate to one another. It is a new chapter in human development, enabled by extraordinary technology advances commensurate with those of the first, second, and third industrial revolutions. In short, we are in the midst of technological revolution. Inspired of this, the education system, or what we call the factory model education that has largely been in place, has remained mostly unchanged since the 19th and 20th centuries. Further compounding this problem are the several systemic problems that exist, particularly in the Philippine education system, which we shall discuss momentarily. So what does the fourth industrial revolution hold for us in the management profession? Apparently, there are several implications. And as alarmist as the theme, human capital, be competitive or die, may sound, I agree with it in a sense that it underscores the urgency with which we must take reforms in our educational system in order to produce the best quality talent pool. The World Bank defines human capital as the knowledge, skills, and health that people invest in and accumulate throughout their lives, enabling them to realize the potentials as productive members of society. In that regard, ensuring the wealth of our human capital is inviolable part of the economy and nation building, as this growth is based on the accumulative talent and competencies our people possess. Thus, it is paramount that as leaders in the management and people management profession, we maintain our foresight in the trends that happen in the world's global workforce, or risk lagging terribly behind in a race where the Philippines regrettably has some weak points. The fourth industrial revolution signifies that many jobs will be displaced because of technological advancements. The International Labor Organization warns that 56% of employment in ASEAN countries, namely Cambodia, Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam, is at high risk of displacement due to technology in 1 to 2 decades. Soon, routine tasks or assembly line positions that were popularized by the factory model school system from the first and second industrial revolution will be phased out in favor of automation. Now more than ever, faced with the demands of a rapidly changing and developing world, it is crucial for our country's education system to evolve and adapt to the times. After all, we cannot be content with simply granting degrees for the sake of ensuring that there are new members in our recruitment pool. Numbers for mere human capital. With the fourth industrial revolution looming, it is not enough to produce mere manpower. That is surely one way to fall behind the times. Rather, we must enable the molding of the 21st century capabilities among our workforce, producing highly skilled workers adept in problem solving and innovation. What exactly that entails and the challenges that Endeavor will face ahead are both key highlights that I wish to discuss and reflect with you. Can you ask, pwede bang medyo put it down, this light? It is my belief that education is the great equalizer that must always be able to afford our citizens the leverage to escape the throes of poverty and achieve success and accomplishment in their lifetime, regardless of their economic circumstances. The United Nations recognizes education as a universal right and has adopted quality education for us all as one of its goals to achieve sustainable development in 2030. According to the United Nations, education enables upward socioeconomic mobility and is a key to escaping poverty. In addition to improving quality of life, access to inclusive education can help equip our youth with the tools required to develop innovative solutions to the world's greatest problems. I've always believed and I've always been a staunch advocate for quality, globally competitive education that is accessible to all. As much as we are after growing the ranks of the members of our workforce and talent pool, we are after quality as much as quantity. As we will learn more today, our schools must shape their minds not only with the knowledge of that they ought to learn, but how they view things and view the world so that they may look at it with possibility and opportunity. A strong learning foundation that prizes ingenuity and critical thinking is crucial to stronger nation building, as it is from our youth's ranks that the nation's future leaders, innovators, and change makers will rise. After all, an educational system that is globally competitive is first of all globally and socially relevant, one that has evolved and has been fine-tuned to suit the needs and sensibilities of today's world. Moreover, education, while harbored on a wealth of history and previous knowledge, must also seek to be current and relevant in today's ever-changing world. In order to remain truly globally competitive, much self-reflection is essential. Teaching is one of the world's oldest and noblest professions, and education is one of the human race's most defining triumphs as a universal institution that is built on a strong yet evolving foundation of knowledge that continues to grow in the pursuit of a better understanding of our world. Reforms in our education system that foster globally relevant skills and innovation are long overdue. But we shall get to that later. As chairman of the Higher and Technical Education in Congress, we continue to ally ourselves with the nation's stakeholders as the committee commits to its role in strengthening the core and system of higher learning in the country. As we ally ourselves with the nation's stakeholders, our work in Congress allows us to draft, forward, discuss, and debate bills and other legislative work and documents that all pertain to the improvement of tertiary education across the nation. Throughout that period, the input and experiences of actual educators from colleges and universities were indispensable, greatly contributing to our own knowledge and awareness on the actual state of affairs, as they are the ones on the ground. In that time, our eyes have been opened to the nuances and complexities of the dire state of higher education in the Philippines, as we submit ourselves to the day-to-day affairs of creating and forwarding solutions to the systemic inadequacies of our educational system in the country. They all point to one thing: when it comes to global competitiveness and readiness, more work still needs to be done with our country's educational system. Data from the World Bank shows that the Philippines invested only 3.9% of its gross domestic product in education. While it is higher than the 3.2% we invested in 2020, it is still a far mark away from the 6% as prescribed by the United Nations. This is a problem that not only plagues our tertiary system, but also the basic education sector. Given the minuscule amount the country allots to education, it is appalling, but perhaps not shocking, that the Program for International Study Assessment, or PISA, by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development revealed that the Philippines ranked dead last in reading and ranked second last in mathematics and science among 69 countries. It was the first time the Philippines participated in the PISA, which rated 15-year-old children's abilities to use the reading, mathematics, and science knowledge and skills to meet real-time challenges. What does this show? It shows that the very foundation of critical thinking and problem solving that need to be inculcated in children, beginning from the time they start schooling, is missing. While we have always prided ourselves on literacy, there are large gaps in functional literacy, the application of reading, writing, and arithmetic to solve problems, coupled with the ability to follow written and verbal instructions. Another assessment that trends in international mathematics and science study, or the TIMSS, showed that the Philippines also ranked the lowest among 58 countries for mathematics and science. From these, only 19% of Filipino students reached the low level, meaning they had some basic mathematical knowledge, while 61% did not reach this level. In science, only 13% of Filipino students also reached the low level, while 87% did not make the cutoff. Another international test, the Southeast Asian Primary Learning Metrics, reported that only 10% of the country's grade 5 students pass proficiency standards in reading, 2% in writing, and 17% in mathematics. As if that is not enough, the World Bank released last June 2022 the State of Global Learning Poverty report. Shows that we, in this country, the learning poverty means being unable to read and understand a simple text by age 10. The incidence of learning poverty in the Philippines is 91%, while Singapore is at 3%. This means that when you line up 100 10-year-old Filipinos, 91 of them would be unable to read, while you line up 100 10-year-old students from Singapore, only 3 of them would not be able to read. Clear as day, all studies independently made proved that the country as an educational crisis, where we constantly produce students with subpar capacities, and that there is a wide gap between our country's quality education and that our neighboring countries. Our country's children sadly fall far behind the competencies required to build the functional skills to become globally competitive. Failing in math and science is one aspect, yet what hits a sore point in our dismal performance is reading, an abrupt wake-up call for a nation that has always prided itself in its English proficiency. there is so much emphasis on the English language as if it is common knowledge that English is the language of global business. Simply put, if only stands to reason that a globally competitive populace must prove to be consistently proficient in English for our workplace to remain highly employable and for businesses and in respect our national economy to thrive. The data, to date, the Philippine economy's largest contributor is its service sector, of which the IT BPO industry, as well as OFW remittances and the tourism industry comprise. These workforces rely on Filipinos' English proficiency as a key competitive advantage, especially when it comes to our BPO sector. However, as PISA seems to point out, this is an advantage which we seem to be steadily losing our grip. Our Asian neighbors, who once looked up to us for our fluency in English, are now edging out the Philippines, particularly Malaysia and Singapore. Moreover, other ASEAN countries who have exhibited lackluster rankings in English proficiency have established a national English roadmap, further exhibiting that the ability to speak, read, write, and comprehend in English is one that they have taken seriously as a competitive workforce advantage. While the Philippines still enjoys a robust IT BPO industry, Malaysia ranks #1 in the shared services space, enabling higher value jobs in IT BPM in the BPO industry. That could have easily been us. If this seems like a record outcome, the result is that we have already begun to reel from the effects of the decline in our English proficiency, not just in the BPO industry, but also in healthcare, to which we export millions of Filipinos abroad. While our Filipino healthcare workers were once highly desired for their competence and fluency in the English language, a September 2017 migration program to the United Kingdom worth roughly about 300 million pesos in salary ended up unsuccessful after 90% of recruited Filipino nurses failed their English test. As we can see, the uneven quality of instruction and learning across the board pervades both our basic education and higher education systems. The Commission on Higher Education recorded 1,963 public and private higher education institutions catering to 108 million Filipinos. This translates to about one institution serving 55,000 Filipinos. This year, only 4 universities from the Philippines made it in a higher education rankings around the world, with the University of the Philippines as the best performing institution in the country, ranking 77 in the QS Asia ranking this year. Ateneo de Manila University ranked 124th, De La Salle University at 168th, while the University of Santo Tomas was ranked 177. In the Times Higher Education ranking in Asia, only the University of the Philippines and De La Salle University made the cut-off at 129th and 401 to 500 respectively. To this day, most still prefer to enroll in the National Capital Region and in other major urban areas in hopes to achieve a better quality education as a further result of uneven distribution of resources in other regions in the country. This keeps education concentrated and insulated within Metro Manila and other metropolitan areas. Aside from the issue of oversaturation, this also poses problems for other degree offerings that are left disregarded, as students are likely to join and stay within industries that are available near the university of choice. rather than being encouraged to pursue degrees in different parts of the country that offer programs more attuned to the community's needs. Moreover, these higher education institutions employ a total of 136,186 faculty members to handle the institution's basic functions, including teaching, research, and community extension service. However, according to CHED policy, these institutions may only employ faculty members who possess a master's degree as a minimum qualification. With that in mind, it is alarming to discover that only 37.59% of those employed have obtained a master's degree, and the most of these employed faculty are in fact bachelor's degree holders at about 45%. The figure is even more dismal for doctorate degrees or degree holders that only constitute about 16.58% of the population. It is clear as day that the number of qualified faculty members employed in our higher learning institutions across the nation is insufficient in order to provide a standard level of quality of instruction that is crucial in molding the minds of our youth. Also worth noting is that 55.87% of the first-time licensure examination takers pass the exams, while only 37.87% of graduates across all disciplines pass the licensure examination. That means more than half of our graduates are unable to practice their professions. That is wasted potential and human capital which needs to be addressed. The country exhibits a lackluster performance when it comes to the field of STEM and research. With the research environment left much to be done. Across 6 major countries in the ASEAN, the Philippines has lowest proportion of its researchers coming from the higher education sector at 36.41%, in contrast with Malaysia at 81.56%, Indonesia at almost 55%, Vietnam at 49%, and Thailand at 53.76%. In 2017, Malaysia published 29,606 index publications compared to just 2,891 from the Philippines. In March this year, college unemployment alone was 27% against an unemployment of 5.8% according to the Philippine Statistics Authority. That statistics is truly worrying. We have long taught our youth, as what our elders have taught us, that education is the ticket to better life. Thus, a degree is necessary to achieving success and ability. With statistics, this is staggering. This essential life lesson amounts to nothing but empty words. It is unacceptable that there is a mismatch between jobs and degree programs in these institutions with positions that are vacant yet and hard to fill at the moment. In a study by the Philippine Institute of Development Studies, they attributed the difficulties in producing appropriate manpower and skills in filling job opportunities to 4 factors. First, a lack in direct one-to-one correspondence between courses and jobs. Number 2, our inability to measure employment indicators such as our labor force's current skill set, the reasons behind their unsuccessful applications, and present industry demands. Number 3, rapidly evolving technology renders many of our graduates' knowledge as obsolete. And 4th is a production due to lack of upskilling and further training among our workers. Given this plethora of information, where do we go from here? As you see, a lot of work needs to be done. This is why it is high time we lift ourselves up by the bootstraps and get to work. While the PISA and TIMSS results were nothing short of an embarrassment, they did set a precedent, the willingness to be externally audited and adhere to competitive or comparative data standard and international frameworks as set by other countries. If these international rankings are to be taken seriously, this signifies the crucial need to institutionalize higher level skills by being measured against international standards. This could lead to an overhaul of curricula that not only comply with the rigors of global standards but also include global sensibilities. As I've earlier discussed, our ability to foster other globally relevant and 21st century skills such as problem solving and innovation is one that is in dire need. English proficiency along with computer literacy are but basic competences that need to be mastered in order to sustain a competitive advantage in the global workforce. In other words, these will soon become more necessities in the workplace instead of being an employee's best trait. It is also high time that we strengthen our international linkages that allow for an interchange of skills and education. From our membership alone in the ASEAN Free Trade Agreements, we are compelled to ensure that we are prepared to participate in the global mobility of talent. This requires our compliance with international education frameworks such as the Bologna Accord and the Washington Accord, both of which are multilateral agreements between countries for the recognition of a respective tertiary degrees, and the ASEAN Qualification Program, a common relevance framework for ASEAN countries for educational qualifications. Its simple global competitiveness is preceded by global connections. Aside from adhering to the international standards and gaining what we can from international linkages, naturally, there are steps we can take in our own backyard, so to speak. The globalization of our workforce, after all, is not only geared towards a globally competitive workforce for export, but ones who could also constitute to our shores. As a member of Congress, allow me to share with you some of the legislative work we have accomplished in line with this plan. In the 18th Congress, we have passed Republic Act 11899, the Second Congressional Commission on Education Act, or EDCOM 2, which will be in charge of reviewing, assessing, and evaluating the state of Philippine education and recommending innovation and targeted policy reforms in education. This will further ensure that safeguards are in place to uplift and maintain a high-quality education in the country. In order to carry out these reforms, the allocation for this initiative is essential. While we welcome the proposed 2023 budget allocation for education this year, which increased from last year, we are also working on steps to encourage our colleagues to make similar increases to higher education budget this year to carry out these changes. By the way, we have already organized the commission. This will be composed of 5 members from the Senate and also 5 members from the House of Representatives. The chair of the Committee on Higher and Technical Education and the chairman of the Committee on Basic Education will be members of this EDCOM 2. The representative of the Senate, we have also the same, in addition to this, to Senator Chis Escudero and Senator Win Gatchalian, Senator Joel Villanueva, Sani Angara, and I think Pia Cayetano will be joining the team. This representation has also refiled House Bill 979 in this 19th Congress that seeks to create a tripartite council with representatives from the academe, the industry, and the government to formulate policies and programs to bridge industry demands and school curricula. As industries change and evolve at a breakneck pace, educational institutions must intuitively understand this industry's needs for the curriculum to adapt efficiently and dynamically in order to address industry needs as they develop. We believe that an open and continuous communication between schools and industry partners will lead to an up-to-date curricula, industry standards and practices development once students graduate, higher productivity results, more on-the-job training programs, mentoring programs, and other initiatives that benefit both the industry and the training schools. The vision of fostering a national culture of innovation alongside achieving twin goals of national productivity and job rotation or job creation has also compelled this representation to file House Bill 976 or the Philippine Entrepreneurs Academy. This aims to establish a specialized institute offering comprehensive and rigorous entrepreneurial education to senior high school graduates and even those who are currently in college in order to produce highly competent and top-notch entrepreneurs. This academy will train students to look for opportunities where they can create innovation in different fields through a scientific and policy-oriented education. I also would like to inform you that in our region, as a major contribution that we have during the last Congress, we have approved a law or a bill that was signed by the President creating the Cordillera State Institute of Technical Education as provided for under Republic Act 11192. The implementation of the Cordillera State Institute of Technical Education integrates all TESDA regional centers in the whole of Cordillera, and this will realize the goal of ensuring that we will provide globally acceptable programs for the development of TechBook in our Cordillera region. This representation also sponsored House Bill 991, which seeks to strengthen the Commission on Higher Education and empower it to better respond to the demands of overseeing almost 2,000 higher education institutions all over the country and perform expanded functions, including the exercise of some quasi-judicial functions, the development of world-class standards in relation to the ASEAN Educational Plan and other international agreements, and the development of sports and wellness programs, among others. Recognizing the important duty teachers play in enriching the minds of students, as chair of the Committee on Higher and Technical Education, this representation sponsored the passage of Republic Act 11713, an act that seeks to further strengthen teachers' education in the Philippines by enhancing the Teacher Education Council, establishing a scholarship program for top-notch students in the teacher education program, and institutionalizing the National Educators Academy of the Philippines. Teachers are instrumental to a child's first building blocks of knowledge, and it is crucial that we produce consistently good quality teachers that nurture our children's minds. Education is truly man's greatest investment, and by recognizing this much needed improvement in our current state of education, can we provide a better wealth of opportunities for our Filipino youth, creating a competent pool of a 21st century workforce for improved human capital and for greater nation building. As management practitioners and professionals, it is our responsibility to remain cognizant of these challenges and forge avenues for open and continuous communication lines between learning institutions and the business sector in order to sustain a mutually edifying symbiotic relationship. The potential of Filipinos is boundless once we equip them with the right resources and tools to maximize their skills, them become globally competitive, and help them seek fulfillment in bettering their lives and contributing to nation building. Again, thank you very much and good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Congressman Go. Such an enormous challenge, and all sectors must work together to address this crisis. So let's continue our discussion about this very important matter. For our next speaker, I am so honored to welcome the President of Philippine Institute of Development Studies, or PIDS, Dr. ANICETO C. ORBETA, Jr.
Secretary Singson, Congressman Go, Ms. Pulido, Mr. Montinola, Attorney De Guzman, Mr. Sismondo, Ms. Asastre, officers and members of the MAP and PMAP. I thought I will be bringing the bad news, but Congressman Go has succeeded in doing that already. So I will just cover, I think, at most half of what I'm about to say. So I'll cut with that. And just give you some nuanced information about our issues. I thought our policymakers did not realize still that we are in crisis. We have an education crisis. And I'm happy to hear that the chair of the Higher Education Committee of Congress has described it very well. The talk that I'll be doing is based on a paper that Dr. Pacquiao and I recently wrote, reviewing the education sector, which is used previous research that we have done at the Philippine Institute for Development Studies over the years, and in addition, of course, to some of the studies that have been done by other people in the area. And the paper is available on our website if you are, for those who are interested. So, as I have said, the paper has some of the recommendations, and I think Congressman Goss mentioned many of them. So I'll just pick and choose, I think, what would be interest for this group. So rather than, because as Congressman Goss already started, the continues to deny the education crisis, let me describe to it some more about you, the nuances of the crisis. I don't dispense with the basic things that, that has already been presented. So one of the first things that I'd like to ask to, doesn't work? Okay, the first things are, this is a graph, is good news. My seatmate were saying, are you saying good news or bad news? I said, this is the good news. The good news of that this graph is showing is that the Philippines still has a very high enrollment rate compared to our even richer countries. We compare very well with in terms of enrollment. Okay, so that's the good news. But the bad news has already been mentioned by Congressman Go, that when you adjust that, the enrollment to quality of schooling, the World Bank estimates shows that we have a learning gap of 5.5 years. The 45-degree line is no learning gap. So this means that when you are, as our senior high school graduates are actually, for instance, will only have the proficiency or the aptitude of a first year or second year junior high school. That's what it means in terms of numbers. That's because of the reasons that, of the information that has been provided by Congressman Go. that we have a very poor showing in the latest international assessments. And the simplest way of describing what we have is that most of our children are in school, but they are not learning the competencies that they are supposed to be acquiring. That's the simple description of what. So most of our students most of our age-old children are in school. They are not just learning. That's the point. So how did we end up? The next question that we should be asking ourselves: how did we end up this low? Many of us were shocked when we heard that news in December 2019, when PISA results was released, and also a year after in December 2020, when the TIMSS was released. But many people were not surprised. Actually, for people in the know, they were not surprised because they know that our NAT scores, whom we conduct, we do our national achievement tests every year, have been showing that they are below mastery, and much more importantly, they are not improving. So people in the know that our education system has problems, is facing problems. Unfortunately, these results were not brought to wide public attention for discussion. Rather than thoroughly analyzing the results and providing venues for widespread discussion, public discussion, we treated our NAT scores as if they were state secrets. We swept these under the rug and did not read the writings on the wall. It could have alerted everyone about the worrying state of our education system that could have prompted everyone to help find a solution. But we choose not to do this. It is well known in the literature that education outcomes are not only because of schools. The home and the community are important players as well. The famous rendition of this truth is the adage that it takes a community to educate a child. Yes, we have brigada, escuela, but that is just for opening of classes. We didn't have a brigada or a rally of the community to face the more profound problems of the test scores, of low test scores, such as that 80% of our students do not have the minimum competencies of their grade level. That's one thing that we should be. When test scores are not state secrets, we have to face them. It's not the problem of the education system, it's a problem of society. Everybody suffers when test scores are low. Another aspect of the PISA and TIMSS and NAT scores is that the private schools are performing better than public schools. To illustrate this is the graph that I'd like to show you. Okay. Okay. The graph is showing you the comparison of math scores by that one. Okay. The math scores across globally, and the red dots are for the Philippines. The first thing that you would like, the red dots are the Philippines. The things that you will notice there that the scores of private schools are higher than public schools. The other thing that you would like you to observe is that the line, sorry. It's advancing. Sorry. Can you back? Is there somebody who's controlling? One more slide. Yeah. The other thing that I'd like to is that the private schools are producing as expected given our income level. The solid line tells you the relationship between scores and income. Of course, richer countries will have higher schools. But that's what we are saying. So the graph is clearly saying that our private schools are performing better. But how are we treating our private schools? Sometimes knowingly or unknowingly, we manage our school system as if the private school doesn't exist. So what happened? In the next slide tells you how the share of the private schools has declined over the years. It's declining 90 basis points annually for the last 50 years in terms of sharing. So what this is trying to tell us is that we are not using the stronger component of our education system. Rather than benefit from better education provided by private schools, the share is going to slowly. I don't know if this is intentional or not, but that is what's happening. Okay, so the redeeming factor that we have in our program is the continuing of the education service contracting for junior high school, as well as the introduction of voucher systems for senior high school. These programs allow public school students to enroll in private schools with the government paying for the tuition. These programs, however, lack a stable guiding framework and clarifying whether these programs are part of an overall education strategy or just a temporary stopgap measure. In fact, in recent past, we found out that the budget of these programs have been cut and offered to finance free higher education. Stability is what private sector needs in order to do their investments, but somehow it's not very clear whether this program should be continued or not. Because as I've said, when we needed money, they offered the budget of these programs for other parts of the education system. Now, the further implication of the 4 test course is that we need a systematic remedial program. I think that's very important we should realize. If 80% of your students are not capable of doing the skills that we have, we need a massive remedial program for lagging students. If we fail to do this, then all our higher education systems will be suffering from inefficiencies because they have to try to spend a lot of resources trying to recover the learning losses from the basic education. Okay, so that's the... And finally, I'd like us to know that those measures were done pre-pandemic. And we already know, that the pandemic creates another set of learning losses. And we are trying to tell us that so we have been performing poorly before the crisis, and the crisis itself creates its own problems. So we have to double down on the remedial measures, and I think this is not being discussed in our policy circles. That we need remedial, but that's what the test course means. Okay. So the thing that I'd like to highlight as well is this graph, which shows that the question we ask, will technology help us solve the problems? This graph is showing the proportion of students who are used by mode of delivery. And the graph is telling us that 80% of the students in public schools are using paper modules. That means that if you insist on online delivery, 80% of your students will not be able to use it. Because they need stable internet connections at home and gadgets to all. So you only see a little bit of online delivery in private schools, but not in public schools. And yet one of our cherished solution was to do online. We're saying that this is not the right time to do that for most of our public schools where most of our students are. What we have perhaps if you want to use technology, use an intermediate one, not an online one. Like giving loads to teachers so that they can interact with their students much more better, rather than aim for the online system wherein most of our students are not able to access. So that's as I've said, you can't use the ideal setup for online learning because most of our households are not able to do it. Let me try to go to Tibet. As we know, training is for employment and productivity. And the recurring complaint of Tibet is that they are not prepared for industries. They are not prepared the way the industries want it, or you want it as managers. The popular term for this, as Congressman was mentioned, is mismatch between training and skills. Now, the best training type is enterprise-based training. This is because it is determined primarily by the firms and conducted by them. So there's no translation issue about what kind of skills that they need. Yet, this data tells you that only 4% of our training outcomes is from enterprise-based training. And that's the reality that you have. So the best type of training only accounts for 4% of our trainees. So what's happening here? Yes, we have issued several. This is not for the lack of trying. We have issued several pertinent tests, the circulars, and even funded programs to promote this. But we still are at the proportions of remains minuscule for this type of training. We need to find solutions for this kind of issue. If we want our training to be relevant to firms, we have to find solutions. And I'm saying here that we may have solutions, but all of that will be just hypothesis and tested by data, because we have been trying to do this, but there's no improvement in the proportion of enterprise-based training. The benefits of enterprise-based or any training is very clear. It benefits the worker because it facilitates employment for him. It benefits the firm because of higher productivity, and it benefits society because workers and firms are more productive. But the question is, why is it there's very low take-up? There are actually incentive issues that needs to be solved, and we have to look at those. As I've said, we have to find validated solutions. Another aspect of Tibet that I'd like to highlight is that one of the famous quotes of Tim Cook of Apple is that Apple went to China not because of cheap labor, but because of ample supply of highly trained technicians that can operate precision machines needed to manufacture Apple products. This highlights that Tibet does not only answer to the training of unskilled workers. They have to also train workers for changing manufacturing processes as well as cutting-edge technology. Sometimes there are two, as I've said, as should have said, that there are two types of Tibet. This is the equity aspect, training unskilled workers, and the efficiency aspect, making our firms much more productive. And sometimes the efficiency aspect gets forgotten in many of our programs. We have to, maybe the government can focus on the equity aspect, but the government should encourage private sector to deal with the efficiency aspects. And EVT is a very good solution for that. For higher education, Congressman Go has already mentioned about our low passing rates, and that more than half of our professionals, our graduates could not practice their professions. So I'd like to mention the point that our education systems are not developing competitive well because our research and education system is not well developed. The paper that we point out has emphasized three things that we need for our innovation systems. We have an underdeveloped research and innovation systems. Our university-industry collaboration is still its infancy, and we're not producing enough sciences, technology graduates, many of whom are not doing R&D jobs or do not persist in jobs that are requiring essential skills. The fundamental weakness highlighted by the stakeholders of the Science, Technology, Research and Innovation and Development, or STRIDE program, is that our STEM graduates lack the exposure to research culture. This is not surprising given the absence of a thriving research and innovation system in the country. After all, after several attempts, we are still waiting for a successful university-industry collaboration that consistently produce marketable products, making the collaboration viable and sustainable. Of course, finally, when you don't have a thriving R&D environment, it's not surprising that S&T graduates are not working in R&D jobs. I am confident that this is not for the lack of trying. Many of you know that we have several initiatives in the past trying to develop research and innovation system, but then again, we need validated solutions. So let me try to conclude with a few statements about what's, okay. I'll skip that because that's been discussed by. Data shows that we are underinvesting as we have in our education system compared to our neighbors. As Congressman Goss mentioned, we only invested 3.9% of our GDP, while 6% is required or is suggested. But I'd like to point out that even if we have all the money, I'm not sure we know where to put it. I will not tire in repeating that given our test results, it's clear that whatever we are doing is not working as well as in other countries. We cannot just pour money on a poorly performing system. We cannot also copy what other countries are doing because research tells us that education outcomes is very context sensitive. We need rigorously validated solutions using our own experience. On all our proposed solutions are mere hypotheses unless rigorously validated. You and I may have solutions, but that will not work just because we have advanced degrees or we are members of MAP or PMAP. Our recommendations should be tested with data. That's how we find validated solutions. So one of the recommendations of the paper is to organize our education system so that it does not merely impart knowledge to students, but must learn from its experience and in turn continuously improve learning delivery. Similarly, our teachers should not merely be imparting knowledge, but must let the classroom experience inform how to deliver knowledge better. Our basic realization is that our education problems can be traced to knowingly or unknowingly ignoring two critical processes. I thought it was a very sophisticated problem. Actually, our problem is much more basic. We are not diligent in generating information that will inform our decisions, or if we have the information, we don't actually use them to inform our decisions. That's what we thought as our real problem starts. So it's not as complex as we thought. The hypothesis is that if we continuously generate useful information and resolve to learn from them, we will not go astray from desired path too much or too long. We will not solve our education problems by pointing or blaming each other. Neither can we solve our education problems by shooting messengers, a tendency that we have shown recently. The solution lies in generating and facing the hard facts and scientifically finding valid solutions that will move test scores or learning upwards. We believe that to solve our education problems, we need to turn our education system on its head and make it like a diligent student who consistently gathers facts and learns well from the realities of the environment he finds himself in. Just as teachers love diligent students, a student will love and benefit from a diligent education system. Thank you very much for listening and this opportunity.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will proceed at warp speed, right, for this Q&A, Joe?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
We will.
So,
Thank you so much.
Maybe you could introduce ang abogado ng bayan, si Attorney Rico.
Yes, thank you so much. So we'd like to call on our two speakers, Congressman Go and Dr. Orbeta, to take your seats on stage for the Q&A. And of course, Attorney Rico is already here. We have microphones on the floor for your use in asking for your questions. Please be brief. And also, please refrain from making a speech. Please wait to be acknowledged before you ask your questions. And we are now ready. We are now opening the floor for your questions. Take it away, Sir Rico.
Good afternoon, everyone. As stated, there are microphones there, but I'd like to open the Q&A before I acknowledge those who might want to ask questions. As we are told this afternoon, the performance of our 15-year-old students in PISA, which is the international assessment for math, science, and reading on average, is below the expectations given our country's income level. In fact, Jordan, Morocco, and Indonesia have shown better performance of the upper middle income countries participating in the assessment, although as reported, our private schools are performing better than expected, better than the public schools. It was also reported, and we heard this afternoon, that very few of our universities are in the world's top 1,000. Also, the passing rate of our college graduates in the professional board exams is below 40%. In fact, I recall that PMAP's own study some number of years ago showed that job applicants generally lack the necessary functional skills demanded by the changing industry standards, such that the skills of critical thinking, initiative, and effective communication skills were found to be in most or in many job applicants. These skills, in fact, ought to have been developed as early as in basic education. But the fact is, we have focused more on attendance rather than quality. As the World Bank in 2018 noted, schooling does not always translate to learning. The result, indeed, as reported this afternoon, is that there's a learning gap of 5.5 years, meaning our higher number of years of schooling will have to be adjusted by such number of years of attendance in school to rate the quality of our education and learning. So, to our two speakers, as we address this learning gap, this substantial learning gap, can you please tell us what, in your view, are the top two programs or interventions that are foremost in your mind to address this substantial learning gap? Sir, Congressman.
Yeah. Well, you know, this problem in education is a very complicated one. As you know, population is also an important aspect of this. Our population is growing fast relative to the other ASEAN countries. And because of this, there is a constraint in terms of resources as well as budget in delivering quality education. So that's one side of the equation. And the other thing here is the relationship between the private schools and the public schools. No? As you know, the major bulk of the budget of our country is allocated for basic education, primarily for public education. And because of this, there are so many private schools during the last so many months, or probably in the last two years, that have closed. And as indicated by Mr. Orbeta, the private schools are performing better than public schools. No? So I think it's important that we provide support to private educational institutions, particularly in the basic education side, and even in the higher education side of our education system. So that is one. The other one that I would propose here is, just like what I proposed in Congress, in terms of job skills mismatch, there is a need that there's a strong collaboration between the industries and the academe. And to make this happen, we need to institutionalize it. And that's the very reason why I came out with the law, with the bill, which actually is very close to approval during the last Congress, but unfortunately, due to lack of material time, it was not approved. No? So in that sense, we can work on this, and I'm sure this will be. And plus, of course, yung last, we really need to study and see the interrelationship of the various variables, and the EDCOM 2 will address this. And if there are inputs coming from the private sector on this, I think we'll be willing to listen to them. And we will be getting an executive director who will come from the private sector to head the technical team of this EDCOM 2. And that will definitely open if you may, the floodgate to really dig deeper into this problem. Kasi maraming related problems itong education natin. Parang napabayaan ito eh. Oo,
Thank
for
you,
a long
Congressman.
time.
Thank you, Congressman. Dr. Orbeta, your top two.
I think the point of the low-hanging fruit really is making use of private sector more, because as I've said, they are performing better. So even if we say that education is a right, it doesn't mean that government will provide it. The only thing that it means is government can finance it. So our point is finance the better or the more efficient system, essentially. So that's the low-hanging fruit at this point. The other thing that is really, one of the things that we are failure is really on the information generation about the implementation of our programs. We thought that by writing good department orders, implementation follow. That's what we all, and we found, and the two major programs that we look at is that nice department order doesn't translate to good implementation. They always implement it the way they interpret it. So there should be a way of checking and telling DepEd that what you have written nicely as it is doesn't get translated into the intended implementation. We have to know that so that we can address why that's happening. Maybe they don't have the capacity, that's why, because people will respond the way they are able. So they don't have the capacity, so we know the reason why there are deviations. We have a nice program in our head, but the implementation is
Devil is in the details.
The devil's in details, yeah.
Yeah.
Essentially.
I recall in one webinar, though, there was a remark by a constitutionalist who was party to the crafting of the Constitution, Bernie Villegas, with respect to that thing on free education. And he said, I think, if I recall correctly, and you were there, Dr. Orbeta, Bernie Villegas said that the intention really was free education for basic education lang, not necessarily all the way up to higher education, di ba? So, we can open the floor now to questions. I see, yes, our esteemed professor from AIM, my colleague there in the committee. Go ahead.
Thank you very much to Congressman and Dr. Orbeta. We may be competitive in 5 to 10 years' time. We will. Why? Because the investors and even the local ones will have to retrain and retool from their own pockets the current workforce who need to produce the goods that will be sold this country and around the world. So the strategy should be, let's work simultaneously with the retooling of the current workforce from government funds and not from the private sector's pocket. Otherwise, we may be retooling for 10 years from now and be competitive, but currently, the existing workforce has to be addressed. And that is the danger of a strategy that is not currently focused, but only looking at the future. I commend the EDCOM 2, and I hope they will address this. Thank you.
So I suppose, Poch, that's just a comment and an advisory, so to speak, not really a question, no, Poch? Or do you want some comments from our speakers?
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
you know, if you rely everything to the government, baka mahirap yun eh. If you let the government pay for the retooling of our private employees, it might be very difficult in terms of budget. I think we need to start retooling people in government. Yun ang importante, to make the government more responsive to our people. And at the same time, in terms of education, we will start from the public educational institutions so that if we retool them, they can immediately have an impact. Kasi marami ang nandito, no? But I agree with you. If the government has some additional funding, probably, but it's going to be tough to rely on the government in terms of funding. We can get some funds, but it will be very minuscule compared to the requirement of doing retooling, retraining of private people, no? I mean, private individuals.
Thank you, Congressman. Dr. Orbeta, any comments?
I agree. I think what the government has, I a little bit disagree with Congressman. We have a lot of training money, and it's all going to training people who are not employed in the end. So we have to think about where to police the government training money. We don't have much, but that can be leveraged. Of course, maybe the private, as I've said, the training has benefits both the worker, the firm, and society. There is a society part that has to be contributed by government, and that has to be decided, and that there should be a share of government in all this. As I've said, the more productive firms is beneficial to society. That's where government should be. So that should be the idea of why government should be spending money on retooling.
Thank you, Doc. May we hear next from Penny? Penny, go ahead.
Penny Bongato. I used to be with IBPAP. I'm working with IBPAP now on Roadmap 2028. And it was already announced that we need 1.1 million employees in the next 6 years, qualified employees. So that's going to be a challenge with what was just presented, and having talked and listened to Dr. Orbeta and communicated with him on his PIDS studies as an input. My question is, getting these employees at the senior high level, graduates, or at collegiate level would be a challenge because the competencies are missing. How do we really upskill, not the graduates? Now I'm asking the teachers. The teachers can only teach what they know. So if they're teaching the wrong things, the students will not learn as well. So is there any budget or is there any recommendation to upskill the teachers? Wait. As a continuation, one of the things that was said was digitalizing, making us digitally competitive, which means we should teach digital or computer programming or coding in basic education. I just found out that teachers are not being taught computer literacy if you're going to be a teacher, it is taught in the graduate school only. So nobody can really teach coding in basic education because there's no one who knows how. So is there any recommendation on teacher training or funding on teacher training, teacher immersion?
Okay, Congressman, do you have any comment?
Yeah, well, we have passed another law, on teacher education actually, strengthening the teacher council. What we wanted here is, we want top-notch students from high school to pursue education. Kasi normally, ang experience natin, yung teacher education, let's say, ang first choice nila, hindi yung education eh. Ang first choice nila, accounting, whatever related to medicine or something like that. Yung mga nag-i-enroll sa education, siguro last resort yon. What we wanted is yung mga top-notch, the first top 10 in the class of every high school in the country, ang unang iniisip, dapat teaching ang kanilang kukunin. So we included in that bill, which was approved into law, that we will give scholarship to those students who will pursue education as a degree program. So that yung mga top-notch students natin, pag graduate nila, silang magtuturo. So that is one, yung mga bago. No? But what are we going to do with the teachers in terms of training? You know, sa public schools, we have almost, how many? 800,000 teachers all over the country. And the budget that you need to do this training, napakalaki nito. No? But each department has its own budget on training. Right now, we have about how many how many employees in government? We have about 1.8 million, 660,000 additional job orders. So ang gobyerno ngayon, this is the number one employer. No? And we are spending out of a budget of more than 5 trillion, more than 1 trillion is spent on salaries and benefits alone. So ngayon, I do not know. Probably we need to look at all these departments and how much is the total bucket for training. But truly, we really need to upscale, we need to train, retrain our committed employees, particularly teachers. And I'm sure there are so many of them. They need training talaga. No?
Okay. Thank you, Congressman. Dr. Orbeta, are there any low-hanging fruits on teacher training?
I think the problem with teacher training is that we don't even have an information on which, as Congressman Go, we have a large budget on teacher training, but try asking on which aspects are the teacher being trained. You don't have that information. So that alone tells you that our training is it's almost like outing for many, rather than a serious, because we don't have even information on which areas are we training our teachers. So that's a basic failure already. How can you diagnose what kind of training do you need when you don't even know the basic information of what kind of training have you provided already with all the money that the government has shown for training? That's basic for me, I think.
I see.
Just one last point. Meron tayong batas, yung continuing professional development the batas. And every professional, once they register again with the PRC, they have to be trained first. They have to finish number of hours of training.
Yes.
Just like lawyers and doctors and all other professionals. Probably we can start from there. Meron ng batas na ganun dapat sundin. Kaya lang, tama, yung what are we going to train them? Ano ba yung kanilang, what are the gaps that we should address? Yung gano'n Kasi yung iba talagang gustong mag-attend. All barangays in the country, they go to Baguio and have training. But after that, that's it.
Okay. Thank you, Congressman. I note that last two standing, let's limit the questions to them for lack of material time. So, gentlemen online, can you start?
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm Engineer Serge Ramos. Actually, Prof. Poch was my professor in the AIM before. And I'm the president of the PCI Tech Center. And we are actually doing digital transformation in universities. We started with the maritime sector. We have helped a lot of universities in the maritime side. And I've seen their success because of the industry linkage between the university and shipping companies. But now I am more focused on the public education sector, not just in the maritime. So my question is, we've been serving SUCs, LUCs, and we have 4 main strategies to capture this market. Our first strategy is through the budget of the DepEd Smart Campus under the Bayanihan Act. We were able to help several universities come up with their smart project campus. So that's the budget allocated to the university. The second one, we are approaching different LGUs for the Special Education Fund to reallocate other funds to help especially LUCs. And the third one, we are trying to help, we are trying to call the private sector to take advantage of ADAPA school law, the 8525 law. And the fourth one, we are submitting grants to DOST, to DICT, and even to international organizations.
And the question is?
And the question is, are there other options that we could do? Like for example, in infrastructure, there's a strong PPP programs. public-private partnerships that are really successful long-term. Are there similar programs that we could do with the government, or any collaboration that we can tap the whole education sector at scale or a bigger impact? That would be my question.
Would like to address that question?
Well, depends on the project that you would like to have partnership with the government. Depende yan. Iba-iba. The government encourages, and there is a law that guides yung PPP, and all local governments can do that. So yung ginawa ninyo of partnering with the different departments, particularly yung getting support from them through a scholarship program, okay yun eh. And marami yan sa Department of Education, sa Commission on Higher Education. They got a lot of funding that they can provide in training, in research, even pursuing higher education. Pwede sa CHED. Maraming funding. DOST, they have a lot of funding for innovation programs. So I think what you are doing is just okay yun. We can broaden that. The other departments can provide financial support if you have programs related to what they want to accomplish, especially in climate change, in establishing green economies in various municipalities and cities of the country. So available to mga ito eh. It's just we need to tap them.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you, sir.
Doc, you have anything to add there, or let's go to the next question then.
Thank you, Doc.
And the last question, I see the fellow standing. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Reggie Casas. I also sit on the board of a school where we conduct master's and doctorate program called SAIDI. Now, after listening to both of you, I was very much enlightened with all your presentation. My suggestion is, can we conduct a forum like this, but with our school members and other schools to attend? Because, we really learned a lot from your presentation. So my suggestion is, let's conduct a similar forum, but let's invite the other school heads to attend, if there is such.
We'll see how we can address that suggestion. Yeah, so it doesn't appear to be much of a question. So thank you. That gives an opportunity to the person at the back to give the last question. Thank you po.
Yeah, thank you very much, Congressman and fellow Rotarian leader Mark Go, and also Dr. Orbeta for sharing insights. You presented earlier Philippines ranking in the different categories, and unfortunately we're really lagging behind. So what do you think are the other countries, especially in our ASEAN, in our neighboring ASEAN countries, are doing good, wherein we can follow? What are the best practices where we can copy and also implement in our country, so that at least we can catch up in those different areas and figures? Thank you.
Congressman, and then Doctor? Si Doc Orbeta muna daw.
I think that's a question. One of the things I have in my mind is that you just don't copy, because their situations are different, their history of the education system is different. But one of the things that I'd like us to be particular about is feedback mechanisms. That's what we need. I think we don't really have cut and dried solutions for our problems. So we need to learn as we go. So the feedback mechanism, we have to build that up. As I've said, we are happy with issuing nice department orders, but we never really check how those department orders are being. So we just find out that things don't happen. After, when we have problems, the problems comes out, but we never really check whether what we intended happened and why. Because that's how you learn. If you don't have an idea of, like, for example, spiral against parallel teaching, for instance, for those who there is that debate, which one is better? So
we don't really know until we have that. And you have results from other countries, but that doesn't mean that it will replicate in our country as well. Because as I've said, educational, as most researchers are telling you, education outcomes are very context sensitive. There are histories of those educational systems, and like, for example, some of the systems don't even have private schools, but we have a very vibrant private schools. And we cannot just follow most of them are very small private schools, for instance. So, or only starting. We are in a different path. There are very large private schools going public. So that's a different history. So that's just what I'm saying, that rapid feedback systems believe the numbers that we have and don't duck the numbers, no matter how bad it is, because that's the problem you are facing, and you're trying to solve it and finding ways to solve it the way we do it in our countries. That's I think my best bet on.
Thank you, Doc. When we have the last word then from Congressman.
Well, if you look, if I mentioned earlier the percent of GDP as far as the budget for education. Maliit yun sa atin, tayo isa sa pinakamaliit na budget. So kailangan dagdagan natin ang budget ng education, but ensure na maliwanag yung programa ng edukasyon. Merong roadmap, what we accomplished for the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years. And probably with the current Department Secretary of the Department of Education, magkakaroon tayo ng, can see certain light at the end of the tunnel.
Okay.
So, yung budget is number one. No? Pati yung kalidad ng edukasyon, kailangan yun ang i-focus natin. Hindi lamang yung tayo marunong mag-English, pero yung quality, yung comprehension, yun ang kulang natin based on the PISA result. No? Sila, yung iba, sinasabi natin, hindi sila marunong mag-English, pero makita mo yung kalidad ng kanilang edukasyon. So I think this is one of the things that we should learn from them. But ako, ang primary natin, yung budget allocated for education. No?
Thank you, Congressman. With that, I would advise those who want to raise a question or two to just approach our speakers later after the session. So with that, thank you, Congressman. Thank you, Doc Orbeta.
Thank you, Attorney Rico. Thank you.
Okay, so I think it's very obvious that we need more time, no? So I like the recommendation of Reggie Casas. Where's Reggie? Yeah, that we will have more session. But at the same time, we do have to manage our time better next time. Joe, yeah. And of course, it's clear that the first next step is to be aware that there's a crisis, right? We don't have to put our heads deep in the sand, right?
And urgent action.
And urgent action is necessary. So thank you, Congressman Mark. Thank you, Dr. Orbeta. And of course, thank you, Attorney De Guzman. They're now joined by President Babes and President Ellen for a photo shoot. Once again, we would like to thank our speakers.
Yes, very insightful, but very critical information.
For sharing their time. So let's give a big round of applause to them. And most especially, thank you everyone for joining us today. So,
this joint general membership meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Good luck. Good luck. Good luck.